showing up. So this is actually kind of a fun topic, and when I present to the development community, I kind of bring in the flip side of it, and when I present to the marketing side, I present kind of this other side, and that'll make more sense in just a second. Before we start, I actually have questions for you guys, but I like to give you guys an opportunity to actually ask me some questions so we can get some conversation going. So if you have questions about me, my background, web development, marketing, I've been in marketing for, well, I guess just a little brief bio on me. I've been in marketing for over a decade now. Nonprofits, startups, agency. I'm currently at an agency, but I'm not client side at all. So I'm purely trying to drive for growth for our own brand. So I'm marketing to marketers and trying to sell them web development as a service. That's the really, really brief Travis bio. So if anybody has any questions about me or Bear Group or anything along the focus to differentiate yourself in the web development world, right? Programming is a huge thing. And I would say go with your strengths. If you're really good at, writing JavaScript code and like that's your like passion, then go with that. You're going to do better by going after your strengths than by trying to deviate and learn also how to do front-end web development, right? Like, you kind of need to pick a specialty. One of my kid cousins just graduated with a CS degree, and he's having a really tough time trying to find a job. And I was just been coaching him about what's your specialization, because a CS degree is again, it's still really broad. He's not thinking about marketing himself in that scenario. So, if you start digging into things like Salesforce, because a Salesforce certification is going to make you more marketable. Learn how to do WordPress or Drupal or some of the other platforms we'll talk about. But if you're really passionate about building apps, then focus on building apps and figure out how to set yourself apart that way.
I guess a lot of these things are moving to these pre-built things. And so I actually enjoy the hard coding part where, I'm doing CSS, HTML, you're using these other things such as React.
Type of marketing people were going to go into. Business management. It didn't sound like there were a ton of true marketing.
Well, my major is finance, but I do a lot of marketing for Tutti, which is a wine store in town.
Okay.
And I have a small business which is beverage consulting for local restaurants.
Okay, perfect.
And there's also some business owners here that already have their business that aren't, so this is like a career path for them. It's like, how am I going to use that?
Okay.
That's kind of where we are.
What's your guys' business?
We teach dance.
Okay.
So we need to set up a website so people can find out about us or the things that we teach or whatever. We haven't set one up, so we're just kind of wanting to find out more information on how.
Sure.
Because it's a little overwhelming, and to whether you go with do you go GoDaddy or Wix or what? You guys are sort of
Yeah, it gets complicated in a hurry.
Kind of going off that, I was just wondering, is there data that supports templates for certain businesses for dance class, coffee kiosks, government, city, tourism page? Is there anything that says this template is 80% more likely to drive revenue and consumers by the colors and feel, or is it just a free-for-all, be your own creative self type of thing?
Cool, that's a great question. Any other?
I've got a business in proofreading, editing.
Okay, so what are you, and I was kind of thinking about this with you guys too, so what do you want your website to do, right? I mean, I think create more revenue, right? Drive business growth, right? Okay, so that's the primary takeaway that I think I want everybody to take from this presentation is, I'm not going to teach you how to build a website in 30 minutes, right? That's not my forte, and plus it's just not real. But what the takeaway with this is that your website is a marketing channel. It is there to drive business growth. And that's one of the big reasons why now marketers are responsible for them. So where we'll kind of start is this concept that came out in 2012. Gartner, who's a research organization, they put out this saying, saying, well, in 2017, marketing is going to outspend CTOs, CMO outspend the CTO on IT. And now that we're in 2017, and I'll show you the slide in a second, and marketing is outspending the technical side of organizations. And when this first came out, everybody was like, that's crazy. How is that going to be possible? Because marketing wasn't responsible yet for making any technical decisions. And that's like where there's this background, and we'll kind of buzz through some of this because I don't know how, it's more historical and perspective than it is, the actual nuts and bolts of things. The reason why, this transition, why Gartner was right in their prediction was because as marketers and business owners, we are all inherently share one characteristic, and that's we're control freaks, right? And one of the things that was crazy about traditional marketing, print marketing, is, it was hours and hours of like fine-tooth detail on like, is the period in the right spot? Is the kerning right on, like all these crazy things. And with the web, and especially with social, we started being able to move much quicker. And we started having this control over these technical spaces. And we ran into these scenarios where IT was managing our website, and we wanted an update. And then it took 2 weeks for them to like take the space out of a period, at the end of a sentence. And for those of us who were there, we're like, this is the stupidest thing, when all I need is this one little thing. But IT didn't want to let go of it. Then came along these concepts of the CMS, right? Which is really where WordPress kind of moved a lot of this stuff forward. So CMS is a content management system. So think of it, it's a framework. There's very few sites out there that are not built for the marketer or for somebody other than a technical person to update them anymore. So your Wix, your Squarespace are the low end of that, right? On the e-commerce side, you have Shopify, is probably the biggest name with that. Now, that's where, depending on your business objectives and your budget and your goals, that might be the right solution for you. If as you go up the ladder and as you start getting higher and higher, ASP.NET or some of the bigger enterprise platforms are hundreds of thousands of dollars for a license. You're gonna have to be a pretty big company to even think about going that route, right? So this is where we start to think about, okay, well, one, and I have some typical scenarios that we can run through, but since we're kind of jumping all over the place, I'm going to go into a couple right now. So if you're going into a new company, you just got a new job as a digital marketing manager. Chances are they have a website, and chances are it's either a WordPress site or it's a proprietary site that somebody built for them. Typically the way it works, and this is the thing that we hear the most often from potential new clients is, well, my brother-in-law used to know how to do Magento development, and so he was helping me on the side, and then we got into it, we had to do a bunch of customization, and now we're stuck, right? That's a pretty bad scenario for a marketing team because they can no longer do the marketing that they need to do. So if you're even from a business side of thing, right? Like, you're looking at this asset of like, okay, we've spent $100,000 on this. Maybe we're only producing $20,000 in revenue a year off it. We need to optimize it. We need to move this forward, but we can't. So you have a couple different choices, right? You can either bring somebody in-house that's a developer to start building these things and coding things, or you can work with, service provider agencies like TripleTree or Bear Group where we, come in and do that for you and work with your team. Or you scrap it and you start over, right? The thing with it, I think, is always coming back to what are your objectives. And if your objective, as a B2B or a B2C are totally different. And so the tools that you might need to use are totally different. So the CMS is really what allowed us to take control of the content that users see and take control of managing it. So e-commerce, right? If it used to be the case that IT had to update inventory and you're running a sale and inventory is wrong and now you're sold out, but now people are trying to still purchase it, right? I mean, you can think about the cascading issues that run with this, right? Or even just something as simple as making a coupon code for that sale, right? If you don't have the ability to go into the platform and build that for yourself, and you have to, again, submit a ticket, wait for them to come back 2 weeks later, it's like, it doesn't mean it's impossible, it just means that there's another layer there that's not necessary. And so that's where things like CMS and e-commerce platforms have really moved things forward, and why now marketing is being responsible for making decisions you were just talking about, right? Like, how do I know when I need to refresh my website? How do I know what platform to choose to work with this stuff? So you're going to be responsible for making those decisions. Like, well, okay, we need to have 50 new leads come in, or we need people to be able to find out when our class schedule is, things like that. And now you're having to make these technical decisions that you don't have the background in making. We don't have a single client that doesn't have a degree like history or communication or philosophy, right? They're great communicators, which is why they're where they are, and now they're having to make these really challenging technical decisions that they just have no ability to make. So that kind of covers this whole next section, which is like, if you don't care yet, you will, because I think we've kind of already established that. So there's 4 main considerations with any website in terms of the technical side of it. You've got your infrastructure. This is an area that a lot of people overlook because it's just really boring. This is your databases and your servers, but while on the back end it's really boring for somebody like myself, on the front end it has a major impact, right? So the quality of the server that you're on or the database that you're using is going to directly impact how quickly your page loads, right? Well, we all know that especially on the consumer side, if my page isn't loading quick enough, I'm gone, right? We've got less than 0.3 seconds to capture somebody's interest. So this is usually where IT still plays a big hand in it because there's a lot of security issues, there's a lot of concerns around this. But this is something where, you're going to want to be like, hey, our page isn't loading, maybe your site's down. And you're going to be like, well, we'll call the web developer. The web developer doesn't have anything to do with that. That's all your infrastructure side of it. So if you're now responsible for it, you at least need to know who to call and how those things are set up, etc. The platforms and technology, so that's the CMS and the e-commerce side of stuff that we've kind of been talking about already. This next section is really the emerging MarTech that Sam was talking about. So I'll touch more on that in a minute, but those are any other platforms that your website communicates with. Oftentimes, even if you have as simple of a setup as we need to be able to capture email addresses so we can send somebody a newsletter once a month, right? That's a MarTech integration. Some platforms, every platform handles that differently, so we'll kind of cover that more in a sec. And then the other element that you're going to have a lot of influence on, if not final say on, is the design. And then again, this is where the marketing control freak stuff comes out, right? Is it the exact right color orange? Well, that's the marketing director's responsibility to make sure that that's on brand, right? So if you've gone through all this work to create this brand and create this business and to sell this widget, and then your website's inconsistent with your Facebook page, and your Facebook page is inconsistent with the print material you're putting out, you're diminishing your brand's value. So these are all the kind of 4 elements that you need to be thinking about when you're thinking about technology. how the budget's kind of spread out. So this again talks to really why marketing is driving web development. We've got the budget for it. IT doesn't. They're worried about how the laptop plugs into the display for the presentation, right? That stuff's got to be more expensive. That's now what they're responsible for, security things. And so as you kind of see like this marketing breakdown, this was 2016, so it's already pretty outdated. But paid media is, 50% of my budget goes to paid media. I think that's a pretty common. I think 22 is a pretty low number. But then 27% is technology. So it outpays like how many people you have on your staff, and then other services you're paying for, whether that's consultants or whatever. So then it's kind of your decision on how you, how big that, what does that 27 really look like? But because that 27% has to go to over 5,000 different potential services. So in 2011, 2012 is when Gartner put out their prediction. There were 350 different technologies for marketing specifically. As of last year, there's over 5,000. We were at the MarTech conference in San Francisco in April, and they put on like a 30,000 people conference twice a year, one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast, purely to talk about MarTech. And this is this huge, 40% of our business revenue comes from helping people connect these tools together to their website, etc. So when we start talking about strategy, we're talking about like, what's the right one, how is it going to work, when's it going to work, what's it going to be with the site, etc. It keeps going. I'll show we can go through a much more basic one than this later, but this is my MarTech stack for Bear Grove. So at the center of it is my website, and then you can see how everything else kind of maps to that. So even if it's internal communication between us, we have technology that integrates with another piece of technology that then integrates with another piece of technology, and it's all for managing our business and driving our business objectives.
Travis, can you walk through some of the key, maybe like the most important integrations that a website owner, maybe someone in the room, all the way up, this would be a massive professional B2B market, but something scaled down for a company that's big in this room?
Yeah, I think that your basic, at the most basic, B2B or B2C. B2C is a little bit tough, right? Because you're driving for conversion on the site. Sorry, I apologize. Business to business or business to consumer. So, primarily think e-commerce sales, transactional type of interactions on the site with a B2C. Something where you have a water bottle that you're trying to sell and they'll purchase it online. Because those are complicated, right? Because you need fulfillment, you need transaction processing, you need ways to drive, you need advertising. I think B2B is probably a more simple one to look at because ideally what you're trying to do is capture leads, right? So you need a way to drive traffic there, so you need acquisition, whether that's through Facebook ads, right? And you need a way to then track that, so you need your analytics set up. And then you need a web form on your site. That's an out-of-the-box feature that you can just turn on. And then once somebody inputs that data, something needs to happen with it. It needs to get stored somewhere. Ideally, they need to be, an email needs to go out that says, hey, thanks for contacting us, we'll be in touch soon. So you need to have, some sort of email service. At the most basic, you're looking at, a Squarespace site, MailChimp integration with Google Analytics, and then, some way to drive traffic there. So you can talk about organic ways to do that with SEO. SEO is an interesting one these days. for that matter, paid media is a really interesting one. There's a lot of people, especially larger organizations, like Amazon is running all kinds of tests to completely stop doing paid media. They have the reach to do that. A lot of folks don't have that kind of reach. But then from there, every scenario is different, which is why the SaaS or the software as a service platforms, your Squarespace site, is so challenging because what they're trying to do is they're trying to account for 100 scenarios. They're trying to account for all those templates you were asking about earlier, right? Because there isn't really data on that. Now, there's data around how something should be displayed, above the fold, below the fold, and that's the kind of stuff that you should always be testing no matter what platform you put out there. But they're trying to account for okay, you've got a dance studio, you've got a wine business, we're gonna create a template that anybody can use, right? And so this one they can change the colors and they can do this and they can do that, and those work to an extent, right? I mean, if you're thinking about launching an e-commerce site, you should absolutely start on Shopify because it's $100. You could start 5 of those next week and not be out, much more than a call to your dad. And so, but a custom integrated, like a fully custom shopping experience, those are going to start at $100,000. So your scale, what we typically tell people, especially in e-commerce, is until you're doing $1 million a year in revenue, you should be using a service like Shopify, because it doesn't make sense yet to go the custom route. Once you start breaking $1 million, and again, every business is slightly different, but once you start breaking $1 million, that's really when you have the not just the funds to do it, but that's when you're spending too much on something that you don't own. So one of the things that the SaaS platforms don't tell you or really market is that you don't own any of your code, right? But again, once you start getting into being a bigger organization, that stuff is really important. The proprietary nature of technology, right? So you're going to be with something like Shopify. I was talking with somebody recently, and they're doing about $500,000 in revenue, they are spending more a year on apps that plugins that Shopify is extensions than they would be spending on a custom site, because they've got this remarketing app and they've got this and they've got that and they're pulling in this thing for fulfillment, right? They've spread themselves. They basically have drank the Kool-Aid of Shopify. And so, every time they get this oh, this will help, your conversions go up by 1/8%, hell yeah, let's do it. And some of them work and some of them don't. They don't really have what I would call a development strategy, and that's something we'll talk about more. Totally rambly on that response. I think it's really hard to answer that because, you need your core, you need email marketing, you need analytics, you need a way to capture your data, somewhere to store that data. After that, because no business is the same, no two businesses are the same, it's well, what do you want your user interaction to be? What do you Triple Tree's lead gen strategy is different than Berger's lead gen strategy. So, what tools we need are all different.
I just wanted to, for their company, the dance company, whatever they're trying to do, a single page web development. For example, if I were to do something for them, I would, depending on what they were trying to do, a single page web app, or not web app, excuse me, but if you're trying to just show your times of when your classes are, or you're trying to actually, because that what you're talking about is huge.
Yeah, so those are your spectrums, right? So even with your guys, so if we kind of dive into that a little bit, right? Your most basic is a one-page site that says, hey, here's who we are, here's where we're located, and that's it, right? Come find us.
It would be a little more than that. It would be want to find out our choreography, there would be a page for that, and then there would be, you would need how to contact us
And it can continue to scale, right?
And
Like-
add videos of like dancers or something.
Right, you could have, here are our class times, you could sign up for the class online, now you need, a custom, it doesn't even necessarily have to be custom, right, but something for them to be able to register for a class. You could have a whole portal that, your students could log into to get unique content, right? So, that's where it's really a matter of, okay, what is my business, like what is the main thing that my business needs from my website? Do I need them to register? If I don't need them to register, then don't do it, right? If it's like, we want them to be able to get directions, we want to be able to provide some content to them, and we want to give some history. You could very easily think about a 3-page site, and then from there, like, we want to have them sign up for our newsletter. Maybe that's the way we're going to distribute these videos to them. So we need a sign-up form, we need a MailChimp account, because that's free, and we're up and we're running, right? So it's from the small scale to the big scale. The problem is, it's one of the things that's, like, to me, so cool about both marketing and web development is that it's all problem solving, and it's all trying to figure out what the interaction needs to be and how to make that happen. Was there any other questions on that before?
I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
How easy is it to make a website easier to view on a smaller device?
How small? Like Apple Watch small?
No.
So that's, at this point, any new website that comes out, whether it's something that's been like a redone site or a completely fresh site, like you guys don't have a website, it should be mobile responsive. Any SaaS platform, it'll be mobile responsive. I don't even think they charge you more for that anymore.
No, it's like Bootstrap.
Yeah, so much of that stuff. We don't build any that are that way. Like mobile and responsive is just considered part of web development now. We definitely budget for, like, it takes more time. You're building for 2 to 5 screen sizes, because now not only do we have iPhones, we've got 30-inch monitors that are also displaying things. So there's more things that we have to do with images and compressions and breakpoints. From the technical side of thing, how easy is it? I can't really answer that, not having the dev chops, but you should not pay for it, whether it's a Shopify site or whatever. Nobody should be providing you a website that doesn't scale to all devices at this point. There are, however, still thousands of websites out there that don't. I was on a call today with somebody who was like, yeah, so we're really trying to figure out this whole mobile thing. I was like, it's like 2018 already. Like, how are you, but in a lot of companies, so that's when we talk about some typical scenarios. Your company has an outdated website. You're going to see this a lot. I would probably bet, unless you're like Sam and you're starting your own company, you're going to join a company that has an outdated website because they built it yesterday. And that's, I say that tongue in cheek. I've got a whole section in here about optimization and when is your website done. And I think this was something that kind of with the IT sunsetting, IT is very much, they're like, we bought new servers, we're good, right? And then 2 years later, they're like, oh, okay, we need more servers, so let's go, and then we're good, right? Whereas this is all consumer driven now, whether you're business to business or business to consumer, it's all consumer driven. And so you're keeping up with your competition, you're trying to drive for more action with your user base. So you can't stop, you don't think about you don't put out one Super Bowl ad and they're like, all right, cool, let's go retire, we don't have to work anymore, right? Like, Coke is always going to do a Super Bowl ad. Your website's never going to be done, because you're always going to need to be educating consumers, bringing them up to speed, selling them hot dog eating contests. There's always another hot dog eating contest. That's the thing, right? So, but there are still thousands of sites out there that need to be updated because they're still trying to keep up with this new kind of concept. Or they built something really, really complicated. Can we actually, this company here a couple weeks back, and they're a shipping company. Like, really big container shipping they're based out of China, their headquarters, their marketing's based out of Seattle. And they were wanting us to do something with their ERP system. And they've got this site that's still, 500 pixels wide by 500 pixels tall. And everything's iframed in. And they have a huge IT department. They have like 200 developers on staff. And the front end of their website looks like it was built in 1988. Because it was. Because it's this hugely complex thing. And I think that's one of the things that marketers, business people were like, I don't care how complex it is, make it happen, make it work. Like, my users need this experience, which is why we're pushing web development just as much as web development is providing an opportunity for us. And that's why they're outdated, because they don't know how, they don't actually have the infrastructure internally to manage this update.
So in a scenario like that, would it be more beneficial to kind of scrap it all together and start from scratch?
Some of it. Probably, I would, like with them, I would say 90% of their site should be scrapped. The whole front end can be scrapped. The parts that should be probably kept are tools that they've built, right? So if they've created, so for them, we were going to build them this ability to invoice people. So people still have to get a printed invoice and call and give them their credit card number. They're like, oh, we think it'd be cool if like somebody could just input their credit card information on our website. Yeah, that would be cool. But it's a much more complex scenario for them because we're not talking a $5 widget. We're talking about a $500,000 shipping charge. One, I don't know how many credit cards even can go that high. But two, it's got to go through a whole nother process of procurement and all these other approval things. So they need to be able to scan in an invoice, the way their system is, and then the person could get it, print it out, submit it, run it through, and then they would still have to make a call and be like, hey, just paid our invoice. You should release our shipping container. So with that kind of a complex scenario, whatever they've built that's like really ties into maybe their CRM or some other technology, most likely you could keep that. But then probably the whole front end you could scrap and create a much more simple and much more easily manageable site for them.
Let me just kind of maybe set the stage for what I don't know how much you have to give us tonight, but a lot of the students in here are working with clients in town, small businesses, and they're tasked with like figuring out how to, and they said, we need you to redo our website. So they have to go out there and kind of figure out how to do the actual, what it looks like in content to make it better for them. So, or they're starting out with their own business and they're just in zero.
Right.
So they just kind of need to look, so if I'm going to put something on Brave, what should my content look like? Or where do I even start to deep dive when I'm trying to help solve this customer's problem? So,
yeah.
I mean, if you have anything that can kind of just, in our time, focus on that sort of thing, because there aren't very many big customers in here. Yeah, thank you.
And that was just a super complex,
No,
iteration. I was going to say also like how to find your customer, like where should I be going to better understand who is going to purchase a product or a service or anything like that. Like I know Facebook Insights, right? It's over my head.
Okay.
But yeah, that's something I think that would be helpful.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely something. So no matter like what your scenario is, you got kind of five iterations, I guess, right? So you either need to upgrade, update, you don't have a site yet, you need it redesigned, you need to be able to be like, oh, should we go to the out-of-the-box solution or should we do something custom? Being that I work at a custom web development company, it feels a little awkward, but like I would say like, especially if you're responsible, like you shouldn't be building websites. You You shouldn't be. You should, like, the SaaS platforms, the WordPress, Drupal, Shopify's, those are there's a reason why they're successful, right? There's a reason why they exist. They serve a niche. Most small businesses will be completely fine on a Squarespace site. Talk to a lot of people who are more startup, and they'll create a Squarespace site for the first 2-3 years while they're building their product, finding out who their consumer base is, really figuring out what do we need our website to do. And then they'll go and they'll start to move to something bigger as needed, right? So no matter what the project is, kind of how they all kind of follow the same basic pattern. There's this scoping phase, and this is kind of what we're talking a lot about. Is like, what does it do? Who is it doing it for? How is it going to interact? What does it need to talk to? This is the part of web development, and Sam, you guys might have an interesting perspective on this as well. This is the part of web development that's the hardest to sell and the most important. Because we want to jump into design, we want to see how it's going to look, we want to jump into building it, we want to see how it's going to interact. It's really hard to be like, oh yeah, let's take 2 weeks and think through your problem. No, again, not everybody needs 2 weeks for that. But the difference between an end product that has gone through that scoping phase versus an end product that hasn't, where I've done it. So my first job, I graduated with a communication degree. The next morning, I was working at an outdoor brick and mortar store. The next morning, my boss handed me an ASP.NET storefront web development book that's like this thick, and he goes, I want you to build me an e-commerce site. Okay, right? And we ran it for a year, and I got fired because we sold 1 product in a year, right? Because we didn't stop and think about, okay, who's our competition? What products are we actually going to sell? How are SKUs going to be handled? You kind of, we'll figure it out as we go. And that's where a lot of websites get, what's the right word? Screwed. Because they don't think it through.
Would you say that even at a small level, if your company is out collecting analytics and data of their own, and they need something like an intranet to exchange data amongst their workers, would you say that a platform is still safe for them in intellectual property sorts of senses?
Yeah, I mean, security is always a high consideration, but I haven't experienced. I mean, I would say if you're ranking the ones on which secure and what's not, I would say WordPress is your least secure. Because of the way that they've built their network. Sam, you can disagree with me on this if you want. I know you guys use WordPress.
No.
Oh, you don't? Okay, cool. Contributors, right? So one of the things nice about sources like Drupal and WordPress, even Shopify, developers on their own time, so open source, right? Open source, they build stuff, and then they release it to the community. And they say, hey, I built this module that does this thing. Anybody can use it. Well, that's really cool because now we have more code that we can use that we can help provide a better service. But it opens up more room for vulnerability when it comes to security. WordPress is not as good at monitoring that, but I think that that's something that can easily be solved for as well. The intranet side of stuff is definitely another kind of beast, if you will. But everybody has one, especially in the medical field. And for them, right, security is a huge, huge issue. So open source technology is something they're always really scared about. From there, then you move into the kind of the boring infrastructure stuff that I was talking about with staging, getting a staging site set up, and your web ops team, whether it's internal or external, is going to take care of that. And then that's really when you move into building and the design. So you can kind of take this whole strategy, be like, what's the site going to do? Okay, the site's we're going to actually take registration. We need them to be able to log in, whatever you decided, right? Now you can actually start to think about what's it going to look like? What's the user experience going to be? Moving that forward. Okay, we're going to have a video section. Okay, now how's that video section going to work? Are is the first one gonna fire up automatically? Are they gonna have a pop-up screen? Are they gonna stay embedded? Now, out-of-the-box platforms, you're not gonna have those options, right? So something like Squarespace, we handle video this way, right? And so that's why you start to jump up the ladder when it comes to websites, right? Because you're like, okay, we really, really want to have this user experience, and we can't because it's restricted. QA and testing, does it actually work? It's always a really important piece. You don't want to release anything that doesn't work. And then you kind of go back more into web ops and then launch. From there, and this kind of will keep going into, some of the other questions. So like, when is your site finished, right? Like I already said, it's not. I think maybe that's the number 2 takeaway from this, is like your site's never done. So you might be redoing a site for somebody right now and really helping them get that updated. And then in like 2 weeks, it's going to be updated because they're going to change, the class schedule is going to change because your dance instructor can't teach at 2 anymore. Now they can only teach at 2:30. Well, if you don't have a system that you can't go in and update, right? So you're like, well, why did we do this? Now that all the information's out of date, we moved, now we have to change this, or we got a new instructor, things like that. So that's really where optimization comes in. So if we go back to that MarTech stack, again, this is more complex than some of the scenarios, but I mean, there's a whole optimization section here. And these are really cool platforms. Like Optimizely, is just a bit of code that you put on your site that allows you to go in and change stuff. And you get stats on whether or not it's more, which ones, A/B test things. So if you're trying to see like, well, would we get more people to sign up at 5 for a class or 5:30 for a class? You could test that, right? Without actually having to do web development. So there are really cool stuff out there. And then this is where like, small business, I've worked with several. I worked with this massage therapist for a while. He had a website up there. And he would always get really frustrated because he'd be like, well, now I need to, now I need to do my blog. Now I need to do these other things. And it's like one of those, yeah, that sucks. You have to market yourself. I don't know what to tell you. Like these are, then this is really to me the core, right? Like, they're a marketing tool. If you don't need a website, then don't have one. Right? Like if you're purely a referral-based business and you don't have a goal for your website, then you really don't need one. Right? And he ended up going back to being fine with just having a page that's like, hey, here I'm Matt. I do massage. And that was it. And it didn't even have his phone number on it. Because that's not how he got new clients, and it was more of a stress for him to have it. I don't know if that helps anybody. Don't take that advice. You should all have websites. So have a development strategy, and really that just speaks to the fact that it's never done. So don't stop thinking about it. Part of the reason why marketers are also great to work with, on web development at least, is because we're always thinking about the next thing. Like, okay, well now there's this new way to engage with my consumer base, so I want to leverage that. I want to start using this other new tool, or we need more data. And then avoid technology silos. So especially if you're making like recommendations to anybody, and they're talking about like, okay, we've got our analytics over here, and our MailChimp over here, and those two things, like I can't actually see. This is one we hear a lot. I send an email campaign, but I don't know how successful it is because none of the data is getting from my email campaign into my website analytics. Right? Those are data silos. They're really easy nowadays to avoid because everything's like, hey, put your Google Analytics code here, put your MailChimp code here, And then those systems talk to each other at that very low level. As you start moving up, those things need to be customized. They need to be hard-coded, etc. The other things that I was going to is just around learning as many Google tools as you can. I really wasn't sure like what the experience level would be but you know, I talk to people who have been in marketing for 20 years, and they go, yeah, we have analytics, but I don't know how to read it. I don't know how to get in there. And it's like, you're doing a really bad job of like your job. Like this is those user insights, right? So you launched a new website and you don't know how well it's working. At the core level, if you're not, well, people aren't registering. If people are still trying to, when they walk in the door, they're like, we couldn't find you. And one of the main goals of your site is to make it easy for people to find you. Then your site needs to be updated. It needs to be optimized, right? It's not working to the full extent, all the way up to that kind of high level of like, hey, we'd like our people to be able to pay their invoices on our website. So that's kind of my rant on just like, don't I don't know how to use it. Like, these are tools, these are things that are there for you to do a better job. And these ones, at least, are all free. If you don't have, like, you know, the people that I hire to work on my marketing team are all fresh out of college. And so usually they're like, yeah, I know of it. So you can have a leg up. If you just get into Google Analytics and learn your way around, you know, and know how to set up a dashboard, or to just look at the data. Be curious about it. Probably don't have to learn AdWords if you're not going to go into PPC advertising, but to your point of like speaking the language, like you need to be able to understand how it all works. So the one thing that I preach a lot about is that your websites today are the center of the marketing strategy. Every marketing thing that you do or business thing you should do, your website's at the middle of it. And if for no other reason, then more people will come in contact with your website than any other platform or any other marketing channel that you have. That's how things work now. And so if you're doing a print thing and you're not thinking about driving traffic to your site, then I would encourage you to rethink that campaign. If you're trying to get people to go to your hot dog eating contest and you're not thinking about what you can do with your site to improve that contest, I would encourage you to do something about that. And then lastly, like most of these platforms, like we talked about, WordPress, Drupal, Drupal's probably a little more technical. Shopify, Squarespace, you can go and start a free site. You know, and I think that's one of the things that is really cool about now versus like, you know, even 10, 15 years ago when I was in undergrad, like we were building websites for our different things, but we were using Dreamweaver, and it was still like this really like, well, you had to have the software and, you know, and we weren't building great websites or anything. But now, you know, you can go to WordPress and you can just be like, hey, here's my domain I want to use, and you can do it. And if you know, it's kind of like there's no failure with it, right? If it doesn't work out or you don't like the way it looks, it's not like you're out anything. It's a free thing. So test
what about
things.
like GoDaddy and those?
So your GoDaddy, so they're typically different services. So if you're going to launch your own site, you need a domain, right? So you need the URL that people are going to go to. That's where, you know, GoDaddy is one of the services that are provided. Most of the platforms today, you can also then buy your domain at the same time as you're setting up the platform. And they're going to sell you their hosting package. That's the infrastructure, boring stuff that we were talking about. Most of it's going to be managed kind of all when you purchase your domain. Domains are cheap, you know, $5 a year you can have whatever variation of your domain that's still available. And then it's going to be, $5 a month for your hosting, right? Whatever it is, right? Low level stuff is pretty cheap. And then your website, basically at that point, right, your website is what is rendered on a web browser when somebody goes to that domain. So if you manage it all, like that's where these SaaS platforms are great for business owners and marketers, because I can spin up a Shopify e-commerce site, I can buy my domain in there, I can pay for my hosting in there, it's all lumped in. I don't have to worry about it. If it's a Squarespace, I think you can do the same exact thing on Squarespace, where you can basically just go to Squarespace and set it all up. But you can also buy your domain on GoDaddy and go to Squarespace, and they'll say, what's your domain? And you'll say, here's my domain. And that's, you'll connect the dots on the admin.
So GoDaddy isn't really a web building site, they're just a domain?
They have a very rudimentary, like, hey, you can build your own site now. And I haven't actually tried to build one on their site in a couple years, so it might have gotten a lot better. But it used to be just going, no.
It's still outdated,
Yeah.
Wix is better.
Wix is better.
Agreed.
Yeah, so any one of those platforms, and I can send out a list of some of those, you can follow up with that. But it's, excuse me. And then from there, it's adding your content, and it's saying, hey, here's what I want my navigation to be, and here's the words on the paper and the images I want to use. They're all going to, hey, like, what's the template that you want to, I don't know, Shopify. I keep bringing Shopify up for whatever reason. They've got like multiple thousands of templates, and you can spend weeks just like scrolling through it. It's like, hey, that's cool.
Wix is allowing you now to have artificial intelligence. So if you go into Wix, you can tell them what type of business you have. They use artificial intelligence to generate all your content, your pictures, the layout. So really, you don't have to do anything other than the optimization part when you have to update all your stuff, depending on what your focus is. And I think that's pretty cool, maybe useful for you guys.
Yeah. I mean, they're definitely building like those kind of basic platforms are much stronger now than it used to be. And then from there, it's like, what is your SEO? I mean, like it's so funny how like when I kind of explain it oftentimes as an iceberg, right? Where it's like your website's kind of like the tip of the iceberg, but below that you have all this other stuff, and which is probably why I think a lot of people find it overwhelming and kind of daunting to get into. I totally lost my train of thought, so if anybody had a question.
I just want you to go back to the page that we had the ABC on it in the end.
Oh.
Website is never done.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the data silos, what do you recommend for taking all those different sources of data and aggregate that? Is there a good?
It's going to depend. It's going to depend on where they're siloed. So, if it's, trying to think of a good example.
Let's pretend like it's a Shopify site and some email marketing.
So, perfect example. I'm working with somebody who the data, and this is sort of speaks to silos, right? Because this is one of the side effects of it, is that their conversion data based on traffic source in Shopify is different than their data in MailChimp and their data in analytics, and different in their remarketing platform. So Facebook, MailChimp, Google Analytics, and Shopify all say different things in terms of attributing that data. Oftentimes that happens because things are Frankenstein together. Because you didn't know, email marketing is now a thing. Let's set up an email marketing platform, and which is great, early adopter, but at the same time, maybe it wasn't fully thought through of like, okay, we're going to be driving traffic for conversions, we need to be tracking, or do we have to write codes on the site? It can get technical from that perspective, but if it's probably if it's one of those things where if you're thinking about it, if you're cognitive of it, like, okay, hey, like we're adopting a new CRM. We need to make sure that that talks to these other platforms, then you're going to prevent that from happening. Whereas if you're like, oh, sweet, we got a new CRM, let's get everybody in there and let's just start managing it. Like 5 years later, you'd be like, oh, you know, that doesn't actually speak to this other platform that would be really great if we could create an email campaign from there, but we can't because we never integrated them. It's like, it's hard. I know. It's like, it's such different.
There's a good solution really out there that's for the non-programmer.
I would say, again, it probably depends on the platforms. You know, like the person I was helping with the Shopify thing, like that to me is a solvable thing because all those platforms are built now to talk to each other, right? Like there's a simple API integration between MailChimp and Shopify. There's just something off with it. So it's a matter of picking up the phone, calling Shopify, you know, working through that. They have developers too that can help with those things. They might be like, oh, you know, it'll be $100 and we'll fix that, but it would be worth the $100, right? Because then you would know, like, okay, that subject line crushed it or not. So it's hard when it's like, well, it's sort of this maze, and you're kind of constantly trying to figure out how to get through the maze. Yeah, I feel like that's like a really crappy answer. I'm sorry.